The first rays of sunlight had barely touched the horizon when Kamla Devi's weathered hands began their daily ritual. At 4:30 a.m., while the city of Varanasi still slumbered under a blanket of pre-dawn darkness, she was already at her small tea stall, lighting the kerosene stove with practiced efficiency. The blue flame flickered to life, casting dancing shadows on the corrugated tin walls of her modest establishment. Her stall occupied a small corner near the Godavlia Chowk, squeezed between a pawn shop that wouldn't open for another 3 hours and a sorry store that had seen better days. It was barely 10 feet wide, with a wooden counter stained by years of spilled tea, a small glass case displaying yesterday's samosas and kachoris, and 3 mismatched plastic chairs that had long ago lost their original colors to the relentless sun. Kamla moved with the quiet dignity of someone who had made peace with her circumstances, even if those circumstances were far from what she had once imagined for herself. Her cotton sari, faded from countless washings, was draped with meticulous care. Her gray hair, still thick despite her 50 years, was pulled back into a neat bun. Deep lines etched her face like a map of hardship, but her eyes, those dark, penetrating eyes, still held a spark that suffering had failed to extinguish. As the water began to boil in the large aluminum kettle, Kamla reached for the small, framed photograph she kept tucked behind the tea canisters. Her son, Prakash, smiled back at her from a happier time. 28 years old in the picture, strong and full of promise, with his arm around his young wife Meera and their 2 children, Aditya, then 6, and little Priya, barely 4. That was 5 years ago, before the truck lost control on the Mumbai-Pune highway, before the police came to her door with news that shattered her world, before she learned that grief is not something you overcome, but something you learn to carry, like an invisible weight that never quite leaves your shoulders. Prakash had been a teacher in Mumbai, earning enough to give his family a comfortable life. His death had not only broken hearts, but also broken the family's economic backbone. Meera, devastated and unable to cope, had moved back to her parents' village within months, leaving her children with Kamla. The grandchildren needed stability, she said. They needed education. They needed a future. And her in-laws, while sympathetic, were struggling themselves. Kamla had understood. In fact, she had insisted. Aditya and Priya were all she had left of her son, and she would move mountains to give them the life Prakash had wanted for them. But mountains, she discovered, required more than love and determination. They required money. Her husband had died years earlier, leaving her with a small house and even smaller savings. Her widow's pension was barely enough to feed 1 person, let alone 3 growing souls. So Kamla had done what countless Indian women have done throughout history when circumstances demanded strength beyond measure. She had rebuilt her life from scratch. The tea stall had been her answer. With money borrowed from a local women's self-help group, she had purchased the basic equipment: a stove, kettles, glasses, and supplies. The municipality had granted her a temporary license after months of bureaucratic struggle, and 5 years ago, at the age of 45, Kamla Devi had become a tea seller. The work was grueling. She woke at 4 a.m. and rarely returned home before 9 p.m. Her hands were perpetually stained with tea, and her clothes carried the permanent smell of fried food and cardamom. Her back ached from standing all day. The heat of the stove in summer was unbearable, and the winter cold seeped into her bones during the early morning hours. But the stall had given them survival. Barely, but survival nonetheless. Now, as she prepared the day's first batch of chai, the sounds of the waking city began to filter through the quiet. A distant temple bell, the rattle of a rickshaw, the barking of street dogs settling their nightly disputes. Soon, her customers would arrive, the same faces she had seen nearly every day for 5 years. The first was Ramesh Uncle, a retired postal worker who came for his morning tea at exactly 5:30 a.m., like clockwork. Then came the construction workers from the nearby site, rough men with cement-dusted clothes who spoke little and drank their tea in hurried gulps before rushing off to their labor. Around 7 a.m., the office workers would arrive, slightly better dressed, scrolling through their phones while absently sipping their chai. By 8 a.m., it would be the college students, always laughing and loud, treating her stall like their personal common room. To most of them, she was invisible, a fixture, as much a part of the landscape as the street lamp or the peepal tree. They ordered their tea, paid their money, and left. Some didn't even make eye contact. Many argued over the price, even though she charged the bare minimum. A few regularly forgot to pay, leaving her too weary and conflict-averse to chase them down. But Kamla didn't mind, or rather she had taught herself not to mind. Dignity, she had learned, was an internal quality, not something bestowed by others' recognition. She did her work with care. She kept her stall clean. She made her tea with good ingredients, never adulterating it with cheap powder or artificial flavors like some others did. She treated every customer with respect, even those who showed her none. Because at the end of each exhausting day, she returned to her small two-room house where Aditya and Priya waited. Now 11 and 9, they were her reason for everything. Aditya was in 6th grade, excelling in mathematics and showing the same keen intelligence his father had possessed. Priya was in 4th, a voracious reader who devoured every book she could find. They were good children, aware of their grandmother's sacrifices even if they didn't fully understand the depth of them. They helped where they could. Aditya would accompany her to the wholesale market on Sundays to carry heavy sacks of supplies, and Priya had learned to cook simple meals so that dinner would be ready when Kamla returned home at night. But they were also children who sometimes wanted what other children had: new shoes instead of repaired ones, school trips they couldn't afford, birthday celebrations more elaborate than homemade kheer, and a single candle. Every rupee was accounted for, stretched to its maximum: rent for the house, school fees and books, groceries, the loan repayment to the self-help group, electricity, water, the stall supplies, medicine when one of them fell sick. By the end of each month, Kamla's carefully maintained notebook showed columns of expenses that nearly always exceeded her income. The small deficit was made up by skipping meals, taking less sugar in her own tea, wearing the same 3 saris year after year, and walking instead of taking a rickshaw even when her feet screamed for mercy. As the morning sun climbed higher, painting the narrow streets in shades of gold and amber, Kamla served her customers with the same quiet efficiency she brought to every day. Cup after cup of steaming tea. Samosas wrapped in yesterday's newspaper. Small talk when required, silence when preferred. Around noon, when the initial rush had subsided, she allowed herself a moment to sit on one of the plastic chairs. Her feet throbbed. Her back was stiff. But there were still 7 hours to go before she could close up shop. She didn't know, as she sat there in the harsh afternoon light, that in exactly 6 days, everything would change. She didn't know that a moment of simple kindness, the kind she extended without thought nearly every day, would be captured by a stranger's camera. She didn't know that the internet, that vast and mysterious world she had never accessed, was about to notice her. All she knew was that she needed to rest for 5 minutes before the afternoon customers arrived. So she did, closing her eyes briefly, gathering strength for the hours ahead, completely unaware that her invisibility was about to end in the most unexpected way possible. Chapter 2. The Weight of Small Kindnesses. The afternoon heat was particularly brutal that Tuesday in late April. The temperature had climbed past 40 degrees Celsius, and the air shimmered with waves of heat that made the crowded streets of Varanasi look like a mirage. Kamla's small tin-roofed stall felt like an oven, and she had tied a wet cloth around her forehead in a futile attempt to stay cool. Business was slow. Most people with sense were staying indoors during these scorching hours. Kamla used the lull to prepare for the evening rush, washing glasses in a bucket of water that had already gone warm, refilling the sugar jar, sorting through the snacks to identify which ones needed to be sold today before they went stale. Her thoughts drifted, as they often did during quiet moments, to Aditya and Priya. Their summer vacation had started, which meant longer days alone at home. She had left them with instructions: stay inside during the hottest hours, drink plenty of water, don't open the door to strangers. Aditya was responsible enough, she told herself, but still, she worried. What mother or grandmother doesn't? She was pricing her remaining kachoris. She would lower them by 2 rupees to move them before closing time, when she noticed a young man approaching her stall. He was dressed oddly for the weather, in long pants and a full-sleeve shirt despite the heat, and he carried a large backpack that looked heavy enough to cause the slight stoop in his shoulders. He was dark-skinned, perhaps in his early 20s, with a build that suggested rural origins and hard physical work. But what caught Kamla's attention were his eyes. They had the glazed, distant look of someone running on the last fumes of energy, past exhaustion, into that dangerous zone where the body simply moves from habit rather than strength. "Bhaiya," she called out gently, using the respectful term for a younger man. "Chai?" The young man approached slowly, almost stumbling. Up close she could see that his lips were cracked and dry, his face flushed with heat, and his clothes stained with sweat and dust. "Kitne ka chai?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "How much for tea?" "Paanch rupaye," she replied. 5 rupees. He set down his heavy backpack with a thud that suggested it contained something substantial. From his pocket, he pulled out a small cloth bundle, the kind used to protect a few precious coins. His fingers fumbled with the knot, and when he finally opened it, Kamla could see its contents. 3 1-rupee coins and 2 2-rupee coins. 7 rupees total. The young man stared at the coins for a long moment, clearly doing calculations in his head. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed with difficulty. "Aadha cup milega?" he finally asked, his voice smaller now. "Can I get half a cup?" Kamla felt something twist in her chest. She had seen this before. Migrants, laborers, students, people trying to survive on almost nothing, calculating whether they could afford even the smallest comfort. She knew that look in his eyes, the same calculation she did every day. Food versus necessity versus dignity. "Kahan se aaye ho?" she asked, already reaching for a full glass. "Where are you coming from?" "Azamgarh," he replied, naming a district several hours away. "Dili ja raha hoon, kam dundne, going to Delhi, to look for work." Kamla nodded, preparing his tea with the same care she brought to every cup. She added an extra spoon of sugar, the boy needed energy, and poured it into one of her larger glasses, the ones that held more than the standard serving. "Yellow," she said, placing it before him along with 2 of the kachoris she had been about to discount. "Here." The young man looked at the full glass and the food, then at his meager coins, confusion crossing his features. "Auntie, main to sirf chai manga tha, aur pure paise bhi nahi hain, mere paas." "Auntie, I only asked for tea, and I don't have enough money." "Chai ke hi paise lena hai," Kamla said firmly. "Kachori to वैसे ही पुराने हो गए हैं. फेंकने से अच्छा कोई खा ले. I'm only charging for the tea. The kachoris are old anyway. Better someone eats them than I throw them away." It was a lie. The kachoris were from this morning, still perfectly good, but it was a kind lie, the kind that preserved the dignity of both giver and receiver. The young man's eyes suddenly glistened. For a moment, Kamla thought he might refuse, and she recognized that too, the pride that sometimes makes people choose hunger over charity. But thirst and exhaustion won. He placed all 7 rupees on the counter. "Bas 5 rupai," Kamla said, pushing 2 coins back toward him. "Just 5 rupees. Par, auntie." "Son, beta," she said, her voice taking on the gentle firmness of a mother. "Listen, son. तुम्हें अभी भी दिल्ली तक पहुंचना है. वो 2 रुपए रख लो, जरूरत पड़ेगी. You still have to reach Delhi. Keep those 2 rupees. You'll need them." The young man picked up the glass with trembling hands and drank deeply, his eyes closing briefly in relief as the sweet, warm liquid soothed his parched throat. Then he ate the kachoris with the controlled speed of someone very hungry, trying not to appear desperate. When he finished, he stood there for a moment, clearly wanting to say something but struggling with words. "Thank you, auntie," he finally managed, his voice thick. "Bhagwan aapko lambi umar de. May God give you a long life." Kamla waved dismissively, already turning to wash his glass. "Bas, bas. Ja, apna dhyan rakh. Delhi mein sab theek jayega. Go on, take care of yourself. Everything will be fine in Delhi." She watched him shoulder his heavy backpack and walk away, his steps slightly steadier now. Then she returned to her work, already forgetting the incident among the hundreds of small interactions that made up her day. She didn't notice the middle-aged man sitting at the pawn shop next door, nor did she see the phone in his hand pointed in her direction. She didn't know that he had been scrolling through social media, bored during the afternoon lull, when he happened to witness the entire exchange. She didn't know that something about the scene had touched him. Perhaps the quiet dignity of her gesture, perhaps the young migrant's struggle, perhaps the simple human decency that seemed increasingly rare in a world obsessed with self-interest. She didn't know that he had recorded the last part of the interaction and was now writing a caption. Sometimes humanity is found in the smallest corners. This tea stall lady near Godolia Chowk just gave food and charged less to a young migrant who clearly had almost nothing. We pass by such people every day without noticing. But maybe we should. She didn't know that he had posted the video to his Facebook account, where he had a modest following of 300 friends and family members. And she certainly didn't know that one of those friends, a journalist for a local news website, would see the post within the hour and sense a story. Kamla simply continued her work, serving the few customers who braved the afternoon heat, counting her earnings periodically, and planning what she would cook for dinner with the vegetables she had bargained for yesterday. Priya liked aloo gobi. Perhaps she would make that tonight, if there was enough. The sun crawled across the sky. The heat remained oppressive. And Kamla Devi continued being exactly who she had always been. A woman doing her best to survive with grace, treating others as she hoped the world might treat her grandchildren when she wasn't there to protect them. Unknown to her, somewhere in the vast digital network that connected millions of lives she had never touched, her story was beginning to spread. Chapter 3. When the world comes knocking. It started with a trickle and became a flood. The journalist who first saw the video, a woman named Priya Singh working for a regional news website called Varanasi Today, had immediately recognized its potential. In a news cycle dominated by political controversies and celebrity scandals, here was something different, a human interest story that touched the heart. By Wednesday evening, Varanasi Today had published an article titled, "The Tea Stall Grandmother Serving Kindness with Every Cup." Priya Singh had tracked down Kamla's stall, interviewed her briefly, though Kamla had been confused and somewhat wary of all the questions, and written a piece that contextualized her gesture within the larger story of urban poverty, migration, and the invisible acts of goodness that hold society together. The article was shared locally, then picked up by a larger regional news platform, then by a national news aggregator. The original Facebook video, meanwhile, had been shared beyond its initial 300 viewers. By Thursday morning, it had been viewed 50,000 times. By Thursday evening, 300,000. The algorithms that govern social media platforms had identified it as engaging content. The video's length, just 45 seconds, was perfect for short attention spans. The authenticity was undeniable, clearly not staged or scripted. The emotional resonance was strong. People felt moved, uplifted, restored in their faith in humanity. Influencers with large followings began sharing it. "Faith in humanity restored," wrote one with 2 million followers. "This is the real India," posted another. Bollywood celebrities added their voices. News channels began featuring it in their evening shows, with anchors praising Kamla's compassion while simultaneously lamenting the economic conditions that made such poverty necessary in the first place. By Friday, the video had been viewed 10 million times across various platforms. Kamla Devi, the invisible tea stall lady of Varanasi, had become famous. She didn't understand any of it. Friday morning had started like any other. Kamla woke at 4 a.m., said her prayers, prepared simple breakfast for her grandchildren, and headed to her stall. But from the moment she arrived, she knew something was different. There were people waiting, not regular customers, but strangers with phones. They started taking pictures the moment she appeared. Some approached asking for selfies. Others simply filmed her as she went through her morning setup, as though the mundane act of lighting a stove was somehow fascinating. "Auntie ji, aap viral ho gayi hain," a young college student exclaimed excitedly. "Auntie, you've gone viral." "Viral?" Kamla didn't know what that meant. Was it a disease? आपकी वीडियो पूरी दुनिया देख रही है. Your video is being watched by the whole world. What video? What world? As the morning progressed, the situation became increasingly surreal. Her regular customers could barely reach the stall through the crowd of strangers. News cameras appeared. Reporters thrust microphones toward her, asking questions she struggled to answer. How does it feel to be famous? Famous? She was a tea seller. What inspired your act of kindness? Inspired? She had just given a thirsty boy some tea. What message would you like to give to the youth of India? Message? She didn't have messages. She had work to do. Ramesh uncle, her loyal first customer, pushed through the crowd looking annoyed. Ye sab kya tamasha hai? What's all this drama? Pata nahi, uncle, Kamla replied helplessly. Kuch video ki baat kar rahe hain. I don't know, uncle. They're saying something about a video. Someone showed her a phone screen. There she was, handing tea and kachoris to the young migrant boy, refusing his extra rupees. The video had text overlay in English, which she couldn't read, and the view count showed a number so large she couldn't comprehend it. Ye to kal ki baat hai, she said simply. This was just from yesterday. Hun, auntie, aur ab aap famous hain. Yes, auntie, and now you're famous. But Kamla didn't feel famous. She felt overwhelmed. The crowd was disrupting her work. She couldn't serve her regular customers properly. The constant questions and cameras were making her deeply uncomfortable. All she wanted was for things to return to normal so she could earn her day's wage in peace. By afternoon, a police constable had shown up to manage the crowd. By evening, a municipal official arrived to verify her license, which he had never bothered to verify in 5 years. By the time she closed her stall at 8 p.m., exhausted and confused, Kamla had made less money than usual despite twice the crowd. People were so busy taking pictures, they forgot to actually buy anything. Walking home, she felt a headache building behind her eyes. What was happening? Why did people care so much about something she did without thinking? She helped that boy because it was the right thing to do, the human thing to do. In his hungry face, she had seen her own grandchildren. Simple as that. At home, Aditya and Priya rushed to meet her, bubbling with excitement. Daddy! Daddy! Aap TV par aayi! Grandma! You were on TV! TV? Kamla set down her bags wearily. Han! School mein sabne dekha. Mere daddy? Yes. Everyone at school saw. My grandma? Priya hugged her tightly, her eyes shining with pride. For a moment, seeing her grandchildren's happiness, Kamla felt a small warmth in her chest. If this strange attention made them proud, perhaps it wasn't entirely bad. But that night, lying on her thin mattress, Kamla couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the chaos at her stall, the disruption to her routine, the strangers who now knew her face. She had spent 5 years in comfortable anonymity, just another struggling person in a city full of them. What if this attention brought problems? What if the municipality decided to revoke her temporary license? What if the landlord of her stall space decided to raise her rent knowing she was famous? What if this was all just a brief moment that would fade away, leaving her worse off than before? She had learned long ago not to hope for miracles. Hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. Reality was her currency, hard, unyielding, predictable. But reality, she would soon discover, was about to become anything but predictable. Chapter 4. The Weight of Attention. By Saturday, the situation had evolved from overwhelming to completely unmanageable. Kamla's small stall was now a tourist attraction. People came not primarily to drink tea but to meet the viral tea lady and document their encounter for social media. The crowd was so large that morning that Ramesh uncle took one look and turned back, muttering about how modern people had ruined everything. The construction workers who depended on her quick service for their morning tea before work found they couldn't get through the mob of phone-wielding strangers and went elsewhere. Her actual business, the selling of tea that paid her rent and fed her grandchildren, was being suffocated by her sudden fame. By 10 a.m., Kamla was near tears. She had made exactly 35 rupees, less than a quarter of what she would normally earn by this time. Dozens of people had taken her photo, but very few had actually purchased anything. "Please," she finally said to the crowd, her voice breaking. "Please, I need to work. This is how I earn. If you want picture, okay, but please also buy something." Some people, shamed by her plea, did purchase tea, but many others simply drifted away to the next moment of interest, their phones already scrolling to different content, the viral tea lady already forgotten now that they had their selfie. Around noon, a well-dressed couple in their 40s pushed through the remaining crowd. The woman carried an expensive handbag and the man wore branded clothing that marked them as upper middle class. Unlike the others, they seemed genuinely interested in talking to Kamla, not just photographing her. "Mrs. Kamla Devi?" the woman asked politely. Kamla nodded warily. "My name is Anjali Mehta, and this is my husband Rajesh. We saw your video and were very moved. Could we speak with you privately for a few minutes?" Kamla gestured to the small space behind her counter, the only private area available. The Mehtas squeezed in, and Rajesh immediately opened a notebook. "We want to help," Anjali said directly. "We run an NGO called Samarpan that works with marginalized women entrepreneurs. We've helped dozens of women like you expand their businesses, get proper licenses, access to capital, business training." "I don't understand," Kamla said slowly. "Your story has touched many hearts," Rajesh explained. "People want to help. We've already received calls from potential donors. But money alone isn't the answer. It needs to be channeled correctly. We can help you transform this stall into a sustainable business. Maybe multiple stalls. Maybe a small restaurant eventually. We can create a proper business plan." Kamla stared at them. Multiple stalls? A restaurant? These were fantasies beyond her imagination. She had never dared dream beyond simply surviving each month. "I don't know about business," she said helplessly. "I only know how to make tea." "That's exactly why you need us," Anjali said warmly. "You focus on what you do best. We'll handle the rest: registration, licensing, accounts, planning. Think about your grandchildren. Wouldn't you like to give them a better future? Aditya and Priya. Of course she wanted better for them. What grandmother wouldn't? "What would I need to do?" she asked carefully. "For now, just trust us," Rajesh said. "Let us help you navigate this attention. We'll set up a proper donation account, transparent and legal. We'll create a social media presence so people can follow your journey. We'll—" "Social media?" Kamla interrupted. "I don't even have a phone, just an old one for calls." The Mehtas exchanged glances. "We'll help with that too," Anjali assured her. "Everything. Just say yes and let us help you." Kamla wanted to say yes, but decades of hardship had taught her caution. She had seen too many sweet promises turn bitter, too many helping hands that came with hidden costs. "I need to think," she said finally. "Can I have some time?" The Mehtas agreed, giving her their business card and promising to return on Monday. After they left, Kamla stared at the card, embossed, professional, foreign to her calloused hands. That evening, 3 more groups approached with similar offers. A motivational speaker wanted to feature her story in his upcoming book. A local political party wanted her to appear at their rally, promising to support small entrepreneurs if elected. A production company wanted to make a short documentary about her life. Kamla listened politely to each, promised to consider their proposals, and felt increasingly lost. All her life, she had been invisible, dealing with immediate concrete problems: rent, food, school fees. Now she was suddenly visible, and the problems had become abstract and complicated: business plans, social media, documentary rights. She closed her stall early that day, her head throbbing. Walking home through the narrow lanes, she noticed something new: recognition. People pointed at her. Some smiled. Some whispered. A few called out encouragement. The vegetable seller who had never given her a discount suddenly offered her tomatoes at a special price for our famous neighbor. At home, the situation was no less complicated. Neighbors who had rarely spoken to her before now crowded her doorway, offering congratulations and advice, much of it contradictory. Trust the NGO. Don't trust the NGO. Take the political party's offer. Stay away from politics. Talk to a lawyer. Hire an accountant. Be careful of scams. Aditya and Priya, meanwhile, were experiencing their own version of Kamla's sudden fame. At school, they had gone from being the scholarship kids whose grandmother ran a tea stall to minor celebrities themselves. Classmates who had previously ignored them now wanted to be friends. Teachers who had been merely adequate were now especially warm and encouraging. "Daddy," Aditya said that night as they ate their simple dinner of dal and roti, "everyone says we're going to be rich now." Kamla looked at her grandson's hopeful face. At 11, he was old enough to understand their poverty, but young enough to believe in fairy tale endings. "Beta, nothing is certain," she said gently. "Don't count your chickens before they hatch." "But so many people want to help," Priya chimed in. "Our teacher said a lot of people are donating money." She showed me on her phone. Thousands and thousands of rupees. Kamla's hands stilled on her plate. Donating? To whom? For what? The thought of strangers sending money because of her filled her with a complicated mix of gratitude and unease. After the children went to bed, Kamla sat in her small kitchen, the single bulb casting harsh shadows. She took out her worn notebook where she tracked every rupee earned and spent. This month, like every month, showed a deficit. She owed 3 months' worth of loan repayment to the self-help group. The house rent was due in a week. Aditya needed new school shoes. The stove was acting up and might need repair. If this attention, this viral business, could actually help solve these problems, shouldn't she accept it? Wasn't rejecting help a form of false pride, the kind that hurt her grandchildren? But who could she trust? She had no education in business matters, no understanding of legal documents, no framework to evaluate the offers being made. She was a woman who knew how to make excellent tea and stretch a rupee until it screamed. This new world of social media, NGOs, documentary rights, and public attention was as foreign to her as the surface of the moon. She wished, not for the first time, that Prakash were here. Her son would have known what to do. He was educated, smart, capable of navigating complex situations. But Prakash was gone, and she was alone with decisions that frightened her. That night, Kamla did something she rarely allowed herself. She prayed not just for survival, but for guidance, for wisdom beyond her own, for some sign of what path to take. "Show me," she whispered to whatever force governed the universe. "Show me how to protect my children." The universe, in its way, was already answering, but the answer would come not from any divine intervention, but from the most unexpected source, a person who understood both worlds, the one Kamla inhabited and the one that had suddenly noticed her. That person would arrive in her life the very next day. Chapter 5. An Unexpected Ally. Sunday morning brought an unusual gift, a lighter crowd. Perhaps people had exhausted their interest, or perhaps Sunday's religious activities drew them elsewhere. Whatever the reason, Kamla felt a wave of relief as she set up her stall to find only a manageable number of onlookers. She had just served her first tea of the morning when a young woman approached. She was perhaps in her late 20s, dressed in a simple but well-made kurta and jeans, her long hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She carried a worn laptop bag and had the purposeful air of someone on a mission. "Mrs. Kamla Devi?" she asked, her Hindi accent suggesting education, but her manner lacking the condescension Kamla had come to expect from educated people. Kamla nodded guardedly. "My name is Simran Kaur. I'm a social worker and also a consultant for small business development. I hope you don't mind, but I've been watching what's happened to you over the past few days, and I thought you might need someone to talk to who doesn't want anything from you." The last phrase caught Kamla's attention. "You don't want anything?" "Nothing at all," Simran said. "May I buy some tea and sit for a bit? I promise I'm not here to make offers or take photos. I just thought you might be confused and overwhelmed, and maybe a friendly conversation would help." There was something genuine in her eyes. Kamla had dealt with enough people over 5 years to develop good instincts about character. This woman seemed different from the parade of opportunists and well-meaning but ultimately self-interested helpers who had approached her. "Chai lo," Kamla said, already preparing a cup. Have some tea. Simran sat on one of the plastic chairs and waited patiently until Kamla had a moment to join her. When the morning rush subsided slightly, Kamla grabbed her own small cup and sat down. "You must be very tired," Simran said quietly. The simple empathy unlocked something in Kamla. Suddenly, the exhaustion and confusion of the past days flooded out. She told Simran everything: the original incident with the migrant boy, the video she hadn't known existed, the overwhelming crowds, the various offers and proposals, her fear of making wrong decisions, her responsibility to her grandchildren, her wish that things would simply go back to normal. Simran listened without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When Kamla finished, the young woman was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking. "May I be very honest with you, Auntie G?" she finally said. "Please. What's happened to you? This viral fame is like a wave, powerful but temporary. Right now, you're at the peak of public attention. In a week, maybe two, something else will capture people's interest and they'll move on. That's how social media works. Short attention span, constant novelty." Kamla nodded. She had suspected as much. "So you have a window of opportunity," Simran continued. "If you want to use this attention to improve your situation, you need to act quickly and wisely. If you do nothing, the wave will pass and you'll be back exactly where you started, except more exhausted and possibly more in debt if you've lost business during this chaos." "What should I do?" Kamla asked directly. "First, understand that there are good people who genuinely want to help, but there are also opportunists who see you as a way to advance their own interests, whether that's publicity, political capital, or money. The trick is telling them apart." "How can I tell?" Kamla asked. "Ask questions." Lots of them. Anyone genuinely trying to help will be transparent about their motives, methods, and what they get out of it. They'll give you time to think. They'll explain things in language you understand. They won't pressure you or make promises that sound too good to be true. Kamla thought about the various offers. Some had indeed seemed too grand, too easy. "Second," Simran continued, "you need someone you can trust to help you navigate this. Someone with no agenda except your welfare. I'm willing to be that person if you want, but I understand if you don't trust me yet. We just met." "Why would you help me?" Kamla asked bluntly. "Forgive me, but everyone wants something." Simran smiled. "Fair question. The truth? I come from a similar background. My mother was a domestic worker who raised 3 children alone after my father died. I saw her struggle every day to give us opportunities. I managed to get educated, got lucky with scholarships and good teachers. Now I work with women like her, like you, because I remember what it felt like to be invisible, to be judged by your poverty rather than your character." She paused, her eyes distant for a moment. "Also, frankly, I've seen too many situations like yours go wrong. Viral fame without proper support often ends badly. The person either gets exploited or becomes disillusioned. I'd like to help prevent that." "But you must have your own work, your own life," Kamla protested. "I do. But I can spare some time, especially in the beginning. Think of me as an advisor, someone who can help you evaluate offers, understand what's realistic, protect you from scams. No charge, no obligation." Kamla studied the young woman's face. Every instinct told her that Simran was sincere, but decades of hardship had also taught her to be careful. "Let me think about it," she said finally. "Can you come back tomorrow?" "Of course," Simran said, standing. "But Auntie G, one more thing. That NGO that approached you, Samarpan? I know them. They're actually legitimate. They've done good work with several women entrepreneurs. I'm not saying you should definitely work with them, but they're worth considering seriously." After Simran left, Kamla felt something she hadn't felt in days, a sense of clarity. For the first time since this chaos began, someone had spoken to her like an equal, had explained things without condescension, had offered help without immediate expectation. That evening, after closing the stall, Kamla stopped by the small community center in her neighborhood where the women's self-help group met. She found the group's president, Mrs. Sharma, locking up after a meeting. "Are Kamla," Mrs. Sharma exclaimed. "I've been seeing you everywhere. TV, newspaper, very proud of you." "Sharmaji, I need advice," Kamla said. "You understand these matters better than me." They sat on the center's steps, and Kamla explained the situation. Mrs. Sharma listened carefully, her expression thoughtful. "You know, Kamla, when our self-help group started getting government support, I was also scared. So many forms, so many rules, so many people suddenly interested in us. But we had each other to discuss things, to make decisions together." "What should I do?" Kamla asked. "Use your common sense. It's served you well so far. If someone offers help, ask yourself, is this realistic? Do I understand what they're proposing? What do I have to give up? What happens if things go wrong?" Mrs. Sharma patted her hand. "And remember, you don't have to say yes to everything. You can take what's useful and leave the rest." That night, Kamla laid out all the business cards and contact information she had received on her small kitchen table. Aditya and Priya watched with interest as she organized them into piles. "What are you doing, Dottie?" Priya asked. "Trying to understand my options," Kamla replied. "Can we help?" Aditya offered. Kamla smiled. Her grandson was always eager to be useful. "Yes. Read these cards to me. Tell me what they say." Aditya carefully read each card, translating the English into Hindi for his grandmother. As he did, Kamla made notes in her ledger book, who each person was, what they offered, her gut feeling about them. By the end of the exercise, she had narrowed it down to 3 possibilities. Simran Kaur, personal advisor, no apparent agenda. Samarpan NGO, business development support. Priya Singh, the journalist, wanted to do a longer feature story. The political party, the documentary company, and the motivational speaker she set aside. Politics made her uncomfortable. She didn't understand what a documentary was, and she had no wisdom to share with anyone. She was just a tea seller trying to survive. "Daddy," Aditya said as they finished, "are we really going to become rich?" Kamla pulled her grandson close. "Beta, I don't know about rich. But maybe, if I make smart choices, we can become a little more secure. Maybe I can make sure you both finish school without worrying about fees. Maybe we can afford a few things we've had to do without." "I don't need anything," Priya said fiercely, hugging her grandmother from the other side. "I just need you, Dottie." Kamla felt tears prick her eyes. Her grandchildren were so good, so understanding beyond their years. They had sacrificed so much of their childhood to poverty, never complaining even when they had every right to. Whatever she decided, it had to be for them. "Okay," she said, mostly to herself. "Tomorrow I'll talk to Simran properly. If she agrees to help me, I'll meet with the NGO people again, but this time I'll ask better questions. And maybe I'll agree to the journalist's story, if she writes the truth, not some fairy tale." That night, Kamla slept better than she had in days. She still didn't know exactly what the future held, but at least she had a plan, a first step, and sometimes that was enough. Chapter 6. Building Trust. Monday morning arrived with the familiar pre-dawn darkness, but Kamla approached it with renewed purpose. She had made a decision, and once Kamla Devi decided something, she followed through. It was how she had survived this long. Simran arrived at the stall around 9 a.m., carrying her laptop bag and 2 notebooks. She had also brought a folder of documents. "I did some research," Simran explained, settling onto the plastic chair. "I wanted to show you exactly what I found about the various offers you've received." Over the next hour, between serving customers, Kamla learned things that shocked her. The production company that wanted to make a documentary? They had a history of paying subjects minimal fees while profiting significantly from the films. The political party? They had previously supported several viral personalities, photographed them at rallies, then dropped them immediately after elections. "How do you know all this?" Kamla asked. "Internet research, checking company registrations, talking to people in my network who have dealt with these organizations," Simran replied. "This is part of what I do professionally, due diligence." "What about the NGO?" "Samarpan?" Simran pulled out a different set of papers. They're actually solid. Registered properly, transparent financials, good track record. I found 3 women they've helped over the past 2 years. I called them. All 3 said the NGO delivered on their promises, helped them expand their businesses, provided training, connected them with banks for loans at good rates. Why would they do this? What do they get? Kamla asked suspiciously. They run on donor funding, from foundations and wealthy individuals who want to support women entrepreneurs. Helping you successfully actually helps them. They can show donors real results, which helps them get more funding. So their interests align with yours. They do well when you do well. This made sense to Kamla. It was a fair exchange, not charity that made her feel small. But, Simran cautioned, even with them, you need to be careful. Read every document, understand every commitment. Make sure you're not signing away control of your business or agreeing to terms that are too difficult to meet. How can I read documents? Kamla asked helplessly. I can barely read Hindi. Forget English legal language. That's where I come in. If you want my help, I'll go through everything with you. I'll explain each term in language you understand. I won't let anyone take advantage of you. Kamla made her decision. Please help me. I'll pay you whatever I can. No, Simran interrupted firmly. I told you, no charge, but I will ask one thing in return. Here it comes, Kamla thought, the hidden cost. When you're in a better position, Simran continued, help someone else the way I'm helping you. That's the only payment I want. Pass it forward. Kamla felt her throat tighten with emotion. I promise. They shook hands, sealing their partnership. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, Kamla felt she wasn't alone. Over the next 2 days, Simran became Kamla's translator to this new world. She arranged a meeting with the Samarpan NGO at a time when Kamla could spare a few hours from the stall. This time, Aditya came along. Simran had suggested having a family member present, someone who could take notes and ask questions Kamla might not think of. The meeting was held at Samarpan's small office, a modest space that immediately put Kamla at ease. No fancy furniture, no air of superiority. Anjali and Rajesh Mehta were there, along with their accountant and a lawyer. Mrs. Kamla, Anjali began, we want to be completely transparent about everything. Please stop us at any time if something isn't clear. What followed was a 3-hour conversation that Simran expertly navigated. The NGO's proposal was this. They would help Kamla formalize her business, proper registration, licenses, tax documentation. They would create a crowdfunding campaign to raise capital for expansion, potentially opening a second stall or upgrading the current one with better equipment. They would provide business training, accounting, inventory management, customer service. They would help her access a bank loan at a subsidized rate if needed. They would provide mentorship for 2 years. In return, they asked for regular reporting on the business progress, permission to feature her story in their promotional materials, anonymized if she preferred, participation in occasional events where she might speak about her experience. What if I fail? Kamla asked bluntly. What if I take your help and I still can't make the business work? Then you've learned something, and we've learned something, Rajesh said simply. Not every venture succeeds. That's business. But you won't be worse off than you are now. We're not asking you to mortgage your house or take personal loans. The only risk is time and effort. Simran leaned over. Auntie Ji, this is a good offer. Very reasonable terms. But the crowdfunding, Kamla worried. People giving money because they feel sorry for me. It feels like begging. It's not begging, Anjali said gently. It's people voluntarily choosing to invest in your success because your story inspired them. They're not giving charity. They're participating in something they believe in, and you'll use that money to build something sustainable that feeds your family for years. Aditya, who had been taking notes diligently, spoke up. Dadi, I think you should do it. These people seem honest. Out of the mouths of children, Kamla thought. Her grandson's instincts were often better than her own. Okay, she said finally, but slowly. one step at a time, and I read, or Simran reads, everything before I agree. Absolutely, Anjali agreed, smiling. The next step was meeting with Priya Singh, the journalist. Kamla had agreed to a longer interview for a feature article, but only under certain conditions that Simran had helped her establish. She would review the article before publication. Her grandchildren's faces would not be shown in any photos. Her exact address would not be published. She reserved the right to decline any question she felt uncomfortable answering. Priya agreed to all conditions without hesitation. Mrs. Kamla, I'm not interested in exploiting you. I'm interested in telling your story truthfully. The struggles, the resilience, the reality of what life is like for millions of working-class women in India. The interview took place over 2 days, in the early mornings before the stall got busy. Priya asked about Kamla's childhood in a village in eastern Uttar Pradesh, her arranged marriage at 18, the death of her husband, raising Prakash alone, the joy of his success as a teacher, the devastation of losing him, the decision to take in her grandchildren, the struggle of the past 5 years. Kamla found herself telling stories she hadn't spoken aloud in years. The journalist listened with genuine interest, occasionally asking clarifying questions but mostly letting Kamla talk. Why did you give that boy the tea and food? Priya asked. You're struggling yourself. Some might say you couldn't afford to be generous. Kamla thought about it carefully. Because I saw my grandson in his face. I thought, what if Aditya was somewhere far from home, hungry, with only a few rupees? Wouldn't I pray that someone would be kind to him? How can I hope for kindness for my children if I don't give it to someone else's child? Priya's eyes were bright. That's beautiful. May I quote you exactly? If you want, Kamla said, embarrassed by the praise. The article was published a week later in a national newspaper's Sunday magazine. It was titled, The Economics of Kindness, One Grandmother's Daily Mathematics of Survival. Priya had woven Kamla's personal story with broader discussions about poverty, informal sector workers, women's unpaid labor, and the social safety nets that didn't exist for people like her. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The article was shared widely. More importantly, it shifted the narrative from viral sensation to systemic issue. People began discussing not just Kamla's individual kindness, but the conditions that made such kindness difficult. The lack of social security, the inadequacy of pensions, the precarity of informal work. Donations began flowing into the crowdfunding campaign that Samarpan had set up with Kamla's permission. The goal had been set at 3 lakh rupees, about $3,600, to cover business registration, equipment upgrades, initial inventory for expansion, and a small emergency fund. Within 3 days, they had raised that amount. Within a week, they had raised 10 lakh rupees, nearly $12,000. Kamla stared at the number on Simran's laptop screen, unable to fully comprehend it. This much? From strangers? Your story touched people, Simran explained. And Priya's article helped them understand that they weren't just helping you. They were making a statement about the kind of society they wanted to live in. For the first time in years, Kamla allowed herself to feel something dangerous, hope. But she was also scared. Money brought complications. She had seen it before in her village, windfall wealth that destroyed families through greed, mismanagement, or envy. Simran, she said seriously, help me not to waste this. Help me not to become someone different. I want to use this to make life secure for my grandchildren, nothing more. That's exactly what we'll do, Simran promised. Chapter 7. The Architecture of Change. The next month was a whirlwind of activity that transformed Kamla's life in ways both thrilling and terrifying. Under Samarpan's guidance and Simran's careful oversight, several things happened simultaneously. Business formalization. The tea stall was registered as a micro-enterprise under Kamla's name. She received a proper trade license from the municipality, food safety certification, and GST registration. Aditya helped her set up a basic bank account for business transactions, separating it from her personal finances. Kamla attended a weekend workshop on basic accounting. At first, the concepts confused her, but gradually, she began to understand. Income minus expenses equals profit. Fixed costs versus variable costs. The importance of tracking every rupee. She had been doing much of this instinctively in her worn notebook, but now she learned the formal framework. Equipment upgrade. With funds from the crowdfunding campaign, Kamla purchased a proper gas stove setup to replace the dangerous kerosene one. She bought a commercial tea urn that could keep large quantities warm without constant reheating, saving time and fuel. She invested in better quality glasses that wouldn't break constantly. She purchased a small refrigerator for storing milk and perishables, eliminating the daily anxiety about spoilage. The physical changes to the stall were modest, but meaningful. Fresh paint, a proper sign, Kamla's Chai Corner, in both Hindi and English. Improved lighting for early morning and evening customers. A small seating area with 4 real chairs instead of broken plastic ones. Menu expansion. With Anjali's guidance, Kamla began offering a slightly expanded menu. Not too much, she didn't want to complicate things, but a few items that had better profit margins. Proper breakfast items like poha and upma, fresh pakoras in the evening, and a special masala chai that commanded a premium price. Simran helped her calculate the economics of each item. The regular chai is your volume product, she explained. Low margin but lots of customers. The masala chai is your premium product, higher margin, fewer sales, but more profit per cup. The breakfast items fill the morning gap when tea alone isn't enough. Staff assistance. This was the most significant change and the one Kamla resisted most. Anjali insisted that for the business to grow, Kamla needed help. She couldn't do everything herself. It was burning her out and limiting potential. But who would I hire? I can barely afford to pay myself, Kamla protested. Remember the crowdfunding money? Part of it is budgeted for operational costs, including labor, Rajesh explained. Start with part-time help. A few hours in the morning rush, someone to handle washing up, someone to help with preparation. Eventually, Kamla agreed. Through Mrs. Sharma's self-help group network, she hired 2 women on a part-time basis. Geeta, a widow in her 40s who needed income, would help with morning preparation and service from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Meena, a young woman saving money for her education, would help with the evening rush from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. Training them was harder than Kamla expected. She was so used to doing everything her own way that delegating felt strange, almost painful. But gradually, she learned to let go of some control. Geeta was actually faster at rolling kachoris than Kamla. Meena had a warm smile that customers responded to positively. Simran pointed out the broader benefit. You're not just running a business now, Auntie G. You're creating employment. You're helping 2 other women feed their families. This perspective shifted something in Kamla's mind. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was contributing to her community's welfare in a small but real way. Media management. As the story continued to circulate, interview requests kept coming. Simran acted as a buffer, declining most, but accepting a few strategic opportunities. Kamla appeared on a regional news program discussing women entrepreneurship. She was featured in a documentary about informal sector workers, the good kind, produced by a public broadcaster, not the exploitative company that had first approached her. Each appearance was carefully prepared. Simran coached Kamla on how to tell her story clearly, how to handle difficult questions, how to maintain dignity without seeming rehearsed. Just be yourself, Simran advised. That's what people respond to, your authenticity. Financial security. This was perhaps the most significant change. For the first time in 5 years, Kamla wasn't living payment to payment. The crowdfunding money was placed in a fixed deposit that generated monthly interest. The improved business was generating 40% more income than before. The combination meant that for the first time, Kamla could breathe. She paid off her debt to the self-help group completely. She paid 3 months' rent in advance. She bought Aditya the shoes he needed and Priya a new dress. She fixed the leaking roof in their house. She put aside money specifically for school fees so she wouldn't panic when the term started. Most importantly, she started a savings account for her grandchildren's future education. Even if everything else fell apart, they would have something. But success brought new challenges. The increased visibility meant the municipality suddenly took interest in her stall. An inspector came, claiming her license had irregularities. A fine was suggested. Simran recognized it immediately as a shakedown and connected Kamla with a legal aid organization that dealt with such harassment. The inspector retreated when confronted with proper documentation and the implicit threat of media attention. Some local shop owners became resentful. Her upgraded stall and increased business meant she was competing more effectively. Rumors started circulating. She must have bribed officials. She was cheating on taxes. The whole viral video had been staged. Kamla felt the sting of envy from people who had previously ignored her. "This is the price of improvement," Mrs. Sharma told her wisely. "Some people prefer everyone stays at their level. Your rise makes them uncomfortable. Ignore them and keep working." More complicated was the emotional adjustment. Kamla had defined herself for so long by struggle that not struggling felt strange. She caught herself feeling guilty for buying slightly better quality lentils, for taking a rickshaw when she was truly tired, for letting herself rest on Sunday afternoons. "You're allowed to have a better life, Auntie G," Simran reminded her gently. "You earned it through your hard work and integrity. Don't let guilt rob you of enjoying some security." 3 months after the viral video, Kamla's life had transformed in measurable ways. Her income had increased by 60%. She had assets, equipment, savings, inventory. She had employees. She had plans for the future rather than just anxiety about surviving the present. But the most profound change wasn't financial. It was psychological. Kamla Devi no longer felt invisible. She walked through her neighborhood with her head higher. When she spoke, people listened. Her grandchildren looked at her with pride instead of just love tinged with worry. Yet she remained fundamentally herself. She still woke at 4 a.m. She still made tea with the same care. She still treated every customer with respect. She still kept her precise ledger of income and expenses. Success hadn't changed her character. It had simply given that character room to breathe. One evening, as she closed up shop with Mina's help, a young woman approached, well-dressed, carrying an expensive bag, clearly for money. "Ma'am," the woman said, "I saw your viral video months ago. I wanted to come tell you that it changed something in me. I used to walk past people like you without seeing them. Now I see them. I try to be kinder, more aware. Thank you for that." After she left, Kamla stood still for a moment, absorbing the words. She had been kind to one hungry boy out of simple human decency, never imagining the ripples that would spread from that moment. Perhaps that was the deepest lesson of these chaotic months. You never knew which small act of goodness might echo far beyond your sight. You just had to keep doing good and trust that it mattered. Chapter 8. The Test of Character. By the 6th month after her viral fame, Kamla had settled into a new normal. The initial frenzy of attention had faded, as Simran predicted it would, but it left behind tangible improvements. The business was stable and profitable. Her grandchildren were thriving in school, unburdened by financial anxiety. She had even managed to save a modest emergency fund. But if Kamla had learned anything in her 50 years, it was that life tested you precisely when you felt secure. That test came on an October morning when the monsoon rains were finally tapering off. She was at her stall serving the morning rush when a family approached, a middle-aged couple with 2 teenagers. They weren't her typical customers. Their clothes marked them as struggling but proud. The man's shirt carefully patched, the woman's sari worn thin but clean. The teenagers, a boy and a girl, looked uncomfortable in shoes that pinched and uniforms that had been let out multiple times to accommodate growth. The man approached the counter hesitantly. "How much for 4 teas?" 20 rupees, Kamla replied, already reaching for glasses. He pulled out a small wallet, counted carefully, then looked troubled. "Actually, can we have just 2, for the children?" Kamla saw it immediately, the same calculation she had made 1,000 times herself. Not enough money for everyone, so the parents would go without to feed the children. The mother, perhaps reading Kamla's understanding expression, explained quietly, "We're traveling to Lucknow. For our daughter's medical treatment. The train is in an hour. We budgeted carefully, but things cost more than we thought." She trailed off, embarrassed by the admission of poverty to a stranger. Kamla made a decision. "Sit, please," she said firmly. "All of you." She prepared 4 teas and 4 plates of hot aloo parathas left over from breakfast. When she set them down, the man protested. No, we only asked for tea." "Today is my son's birth anniversary," Kamla interrupted. It was a lie, but a kind one. "In his memory, I feed some people every year. You'll be doing me a favor by accepting." The man's eyes glistened. He understood exactly what she was doing and why. "How much?" "Nothing. It's prasad. You can't pay for prasad." As the family ate, trying to maintain dignity while clearly hungry, Kamla packed some samosas in newspaper. "For your train journey," she said, handing them to the daughter. After they left, profuse with blessings and gratitude, Meena said quietly, "That was kind of you, Kamla Devi. But you know people will take advantage if word spreads that you give free food." "Let them try," Kamla replied. "I can tell the difference between someone trying to cheat me and someone genuinely struggling. I've been where that family is. If I forget that, what was all this struggle for?" The incident reminded Kamla of something important. Success had given her resources, but it shouldn't change her values. She had been helped by strangers when she needed it most. The cycle needed to continue. That evening, she discussed something with Simran and the Samarpan NGO team that had been percolating in her mind for weeks. "I want to start something," Kamla said. "Once a week, maybe Sunday mornings, I want to provide free tea and breakfast to people who need it. Day laborers waiting for work, migrants passing through, people like I was, and sometimes still am." Rajesh looked concerned. "Kamla ji, that's noble, but have you calculated the cost? Free food once a week could significantly impact your margins." "I have calculated," Kamla said firmly, pulling out her meticulously maintained ledger. "If I budget 30 people every Sunday at 20 rupees per person, that's 600 rupees weekly, about 2,500 monthly. I can absorb that now. And maybe—" She hesitated, then continued. "Maybe we could get some donations specifically for this. People who want to help but don't know how." Simran's eyes lit up. "Auntie G, that's actually brilliant. We could set up a specific fund, Kamla's Kindness Kitchen, or something similar. People could contribute knowing exactly where their money goes. Complete transparency. Every rupee accounted for, photos of the people being fed, regular updates." Anjali nodded slowly. "It would also create a model. If this works, other small businesses could replicate it. Micro-enterprises becoming community support systems. That's powerful." Over the next month, they established the Kindness Kitchen. Simran set up a simple website with donation tracking. Local volunteers offered to help on Sunday mornings. The response was immediate. Donations came from people who had followed Kamla's story and wanted to be part of something tangible and direct. The first Sunday, Kamla was nervous. She had prepared for 30 people. Nearly 50 showed up. Word had spread among the labor communities. But with the volunteers' help, they managed to feed everyone, though supplies ran short and Kamla had to quickly send Aditya to buy more bread. Week by week, the Kindness Kitchen found its rhythm. Regular volunteers emerged. A nearby bakery started donating day-old bread. Other tea stall owners, inspired by Kamla's example, began occasional free food days of their own. The municipality, seeing positive publicity, provided a formal space in the market for Sunday morning distributions. But the initiative wasn't without critics. Some accused Kamla of being naive, of encouraging dependence rather than self-reliance. A local columnist wrote an op-ed questioning whether free food programs, however well-intentioned, actually helped or merely created a culture of expectation. The criticism stung. Kamla lay awake at night wondering if she was doing the right thing. Was she helping or hurting? Was she being wise or foolish? It was Mrs. Sharma who provided perspective. Kamla, do you remember when you first started your stall, when you borrowed from our self-help group? Of course. Do you remember what I told you? That accepting help wasn't weakness but wisdom, that we all need support sometimes, that giving and receiving are two sides of the same coin. Yes, but no buts. Those people eating at your kindness kitchen? Some will need help forever. That's okay. Some will need it temporarily until they get back on their feet. Some will one day be in a position to help others. You can't control which category each person falls into. You can only offer help with good intentions and trust that overall it makes the world slightly better. The validation helped, but what truly convinced Kamla came from an unexpected source. 2 months after starting the kindness kitchen, a young man approached her at the stall during regular business hours. "Do you remember me?" he asked. Kamla studied his face. There was something familiar. "The tea," he prompted. 8 months ago. I was going to Delhi with almost no money. You gave me tea and kachoris and refused to take full payment." Suddenly Kamla remembered, the migrant boy who had triggered the viral video. "Of course. You went to Delhi. How did it go?" "It went well," he said, smiling broadly. "I found work in a construction company. Saved money, learned plumbing. Now I have my own small business doing repair work. I'm doing okay." He handed her an envelope. "This is 5,000 rupees for your kindness kitchen. I want to help others the way you helped me." Kamla tried to refuse. "That's too much, Beta." But he insisted. "Ma'am, you fed me when I was hungry. But more than that, you treated me with dignity. You made me feel like I mattered. That gave me strength to keep trying when Delhi got hard. This money, it's nothing compared to what you gave me." After he left, Kamla held the envelope, tears streaming down her face. This was why. This was the point. Not every person she helped would come back. Not every gesture would be remembered. But some would. And those some made all the difference. That evening, Kamla called a family meeting with Aditya and Priya. They had grown so much in the past year, not just physically, but in maturity. Aditya was now 12, showing signs of becoming a thoughtful young man. Priya, at 10, was developing a fierce sense of justice and compassion. "I want to talk to you both about something important," Kamla began. They sat at their small kitchen table, the one where they had counted business cards months ago. "This year has been unusual. We got attention, we got help, our situation improved. But I need to know, do you understand why all this happened?" "Because of the video?" Priya offered. "No, Beta. The video was just a recording. It happened because of what the video showed, a small act of kindness. And I want you both to understand something very important. We are in a better position now, but that doesn't make us better than anyone else. It just means we have more responsibility." "Responsibility for what?" Aditya asked. "To remember where we came from. To stay kind even when we don't have to be. To help others when we can, even in small ways." She paused, making sure they were really listening. "Money comes and goes. Success is temporary. But who you are, how you treat people, that stays." "Like the kindness kitchen?" Priya asked. "Exactly like that. And not just big organized things, small everyday things. Treating the vegetable seller with respect, helping your classmate who struggles with homework, sharing your lunch with someone who forgot theirs. These matter more than any business or money." Aditya nodded seriously. "I understand, Dadi. You want us to be good people, not just successful people." "Yes," Kamla said, pulling them both into a hug. "Success is good. I want you to study, get good jobs, have secure lives. But more than that, I want you to be people your father would be proud of." In the months that followed, Kamla Devi proved that character could withstand the test of changing circumstances. She neither became arrogant in her improved position nor overly generous to the point of self-destruction. She balanced business sense with compassion, ambition with groundedness, hope with realism. The kindness kitchen continued every Sunday. Her business continued to grow modestly. Her grandchildren continued excelling in school. And Kamla Devi continued waking up at 4 a.m. because some habits were too ingrained to change. And besides, she liked those quiet pre-dawn hours when the world was still and her thoughts were her own. Chapter 9. Ripples in Still Water. A year after the viral video, Kamla was invited to speak at a national conference on women's entrepreneurship in Delhi. The invitation came through Samarpan NGO, and Kamla's first instinct was to refuse. "I'm not a speaker," she told Simran. "What would I even say to all those educated people?" "You'd tell them the truth," Simran replied. "You'd share what you've learned. That's more valuable than any academic theory." After much persuasion, Kamla agreed, though she was terrified. She had never been to Delhi, never stayed in a hotel, never spoken to more than a handful of people at once. The thought of standing before hundreds made her stomach churn. Simran accompanied her, partly for support and partly to help navigate the overwhelming city. Aditya and Priya were left with Mrs. Sharma, who promised to feed them properly and make sure they did their homework. The conference was held at a large hotel that made Kamla feel completely out of place. Women in business suits, carrying laptops and speaking confidently in English, filled the corridors. Kamla, in her simple cotton sari and worn sandals, felt like an imposter. "I don't belong here," she whispered to Simran. "You belong here more than anyone," Simran assured her. "Most of these women are talking about empowerment in theory. You've lived it in practice." Kamla's session was scheduled for the afternoon. She spent the morning attending other panels, trying to understand the discussions. Some of it was too technical: market penetration strategies, digital payment systems, supply chain optimization. But some of it resonated deeply: the challenges of access to capital, the burden of unpaid care work, the difficulty of being taken seriously as a woman entrepreneur. When her turn came, Kamla stood at the podium, staring at the sea of faces. Her prepared notes, simple points in Hindi that Simran had helped her organize, trembled in her hands. The moderator introduced her, mentioning the viral video, her tea stall, the Kindness Kitchen initiative. Kamla began speaking in Hindi, her voice shaky at first. She told them about Prakash's death, about taking in her grandchildren, about the decision to start the tea stall. She told them about the daily struggle, the early mornings, the aching feet, the constant calculation of rupees. She told them about being invisible, how customers looked through her rather than at her. As she spoke, her confidence grew. This was her life, her story. She knew it better than anyone. "People talk about women's empowerment like it's a program or a policy," she said. "But for most of us, it's just survival. It's waking up when you're exhausted because children need to eat. It's swallowing your pride to ask for help. It's making 10 rupees stretch like 20. That's empowerment. Not by choice, but by necessity." The audience was silent, attentive. Encouraged, Kamla continued. "When that video went viral, people said I became famous for being kind. But I wasn't being kind in some special way. I was being human. That boy reminded me of my grandson. How could I not help? The question isn't why I helped. The question is why we live in a society where basic human decency becomes viral because it's so rare." She spoke about the help she had received, from Simran, from Samarpan, from strangers who donated to her crowdfunding campaign. She spoke about learning to accept help without shame, to give help without expectation of return. "I'm not a business expert," she concluded. "I'm just a grandmother trying to raise her children and make an honest living. But I've learned that success isn't just about money. It's about maintaining your values when circumstances change. It's about remembering that every person you serve is someone's child, someone's parent, someone worthy of respect. If my story has any message, it's this: dignity and kindness aren't luxuries. They're necessities. They're what make us human." The applause was thunderous. Women stood, some with tears in their eyes. The moderator had to wait several minutes before the room quieted enough to continue. Afterward, Kamla was surrounded by people wanting to talk to her: corporate executives, NGO directors, policymakers, fellow entrepreneurs. Some shared their own stories of struggle. Others asked for advice. Still others simply wanted to express gratitude for her honesty. One woman, a CEO of a mid-sized company, took Kamla aside. "My mother was a domestic worker," she said quietly. "She cleaned houses so I could go to school. When you spoke about invisible women, I thought of her. Thank you for honoring women like her, like you." That evening, in her hotel room, Kamla called home. Aditya answered, excited to tell her about his day at school. Priya grabbed the phone to share that she had scored full marks on her Hindi test. Their voices, familiar and beloved, grounded Kamla after the surreal experience of the conference. "Daddy, when are you coming back?" Priya asked. "Tomorrow morning, my love. Missing me?" "So much. Mrs. Sharma makes good food, but it's not the same without you." After she hung up, Kamla sat by the window, looking out at Delhi's glittering night skyline. So many lights, so many lives, each with their own struggles and triumphs she would never know about. Her story had touched some of those lives, created small ripples of awareness and compassion. But there were millions more stories just as worthy, just as important, never to be told or noticed. The thought was both humbling and motivating. She wasn't special, she was ordinary, but perhaps ordinariness approached with integrity and compassion was its own kind of extraordinary. The next morning, she and Simran took the train back to Varanasi. As the landscape changed from urban sprawl to rural plains, Kamla felt herself relaxing back into her familiar identity. The conference had been overwhelming but also affirming. She had something valuable to share, not despite her lack of formal education, but because of her lived experience. Back home, Aditya and Priya rushed to greet her, full of questions about Delhi, about the conference, about whether she had become really famous now. Kamla laughed and hugged them, breathing in the familiar scent of home, mustard oil, incense, the faint smell of yesterday's cooking. "Not famous, Beta, just grateful. Now tell me everything I missed." Over dinner, simple dal and rice that tasted better than the elaborate hotel buffet, the children regaled her with 2 days' worth of stories. Aditya had helped Mrs. Sharma fix a leaky tap. Priya had defended a classmate who was being teased, small moments, small kindnesses, continuing the cycle. Later that week, something unexpected arrived, a formal letter from the Ministry of Women and Child Development. Kamla stared at the official letterhead, unable to decipher the English text. She took it to Simran. "Auntie G," Simran said, reading with growing excitement. "You've been selected for the Nari Shakti Puraskar, the National Award for Women's Empowerment. They want to honor you in New Delhi in March. This is huge." Kamla felt overwhelmed again. "But why? I haven't done anything special." "You've inspired thousands of people. You've created employment. You've run a successful business while maintaining strong values. You've started a community feeding program. You're exactly who deserves recognition." The news spread quickly through the neighborhood. Suddenly, Kamla's standing elevated further. The municipal officer who had tried to shake her down now treated her with exaggerated respect. The shop owners who had been envious now wanted to be associated with her success. The local politician visited, wanting photos that he could use in his publicity materials. Mrs. Sharma observed this with amusement. "See? This is how the world works. When you were struggling, no one cared. Now that you're successful, everyone wants a piece of you. Remember who was there when you needed help." Kamla did remember. She remained loyal to the people and organizations that had genuinely supported her: Simran, Samarpan NGO, Mrs. Sharma's self-help group, Priya Singh the journalist. When opportunists came calling now, she politely declined their offers, but she also tried not to be bitter toward those who ignored her before. "They weren't obligated to help me then," she told Mrs. Sharma, "and I'm not obligated to entertain them now. But I won't waste energy on resentment. I have better things to do." Indeed she did. The business continued to evolve. Based on customer feedback and market analysis, Kamla had added cold drinks for summer months and hot snacks for winter. She had trained Geeta and Meena so well that she could occasionally take a half-day off without the business suffering. She had established relationships with suppliers that got her better prices on bulk purchases. Most significantly, she had begun mentoring other women through Mrs. Sharma's self-help group. 2 women had approached her about starting their own small food businesses, and Kamla shared everything she had learned: the importance of consistent quality, fair pricing, cleanliness, treating customers well, keeping proper accounts. She connected them with Simran and Samarpan for additional support. "You're building a legacy," Simran observed during one of their regular meetings. "I'm just passing forward what was given to me," Kamla replied. "That's how it should work, no?" In February, a television production company approached with a different kind of proposal. They wanted to create a documentary series called Invisible India, featuring people whose stories represented larger social realities: daily wage workers, street vendors, sanitation workers, auto rickshaw drivers. They wanted Kamla to be the first episode, but they also wanted her to host the series, interviewing others like herself. "Absolutely not," was Kamla's initial response. "I'm not a TV person." But the producer, a sincere woman named Mira, persisted. "You don't need to be a TV person. We want you because you're authentic. You can talk to these people as an equal, understand their struggles, ask questions with genuine empathy. The series needs someone like you, not a celebrity who has never experienced poverty." Simran encouraged her to consider it. "It's another platform to tell important stories, Auntie G, and the compensation they're offering is quite good." After much deliberation, Kamla agreed to a trial episode. If it felt wrong or exploitative, she could walk away. The crew came to Varanasi, filmed her daily routine, her interactions with customers, her Sunday kindness kitchen. Then they filmed her interviewing a cycle rickshaw puller named Ramu, who had 3 children and dreams of buying his own rickshaw someday. Kamla found the interview easier than expected. She asked Ramu the questions she herself would have wanted to be asked, not pitying or condescending, but genuinely interested. How did he budget his earnings? What gave him hope on difficult days? What did he want for his children? What would make his work easier or more dignified? When the episode aired 2 months later, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Viewers appreciated the authentic, respectful portrayal. Ramu himself was contacted by a businessman who offered to help him purchase his rickshaw at a subsidized rate. The series was commissioned for 12 episodes. Through all of this, Kamla maintained her routine. The awards, the recognition, the opportunities, they were nice, but they weren't her core identity. She was still, fundamentally, Kamla Devi, tea seller, grandmother, survivor. The woman who woke at 4 a.m. to prepare chai for her customers. The woman who treated everyone with basic human respect. The woman who knew the value of a rupee because she had counted so many of them with worry in her heart. Chapter 10. Full Circle. March arrived with the pleasant coolness that makes North India bearable before the brutal summer heat returns. Kamla traveled to Delhi again, this time with both Aditya and Priya. The children had never seen the capital, and she wanted them present when she received the Nari Shakti Puraskar. The award ceremony was held at Rashtrapati Bhavan, the president's residence. Kamla, overwhelmed by the grandeur of the occasion, clutched her grandchildren's hands as they entered the stately building. She wore a new sari, simple but elegant, that Simran had helped her choose. Aditya wore his best clothes, his hair neatly combed. Priya wore a new salwar kameez, her eyes wide with wonder at the palatial surroundings. 20 women received awards that day, each representing a different aspect of women's empowerment: scientists, athletes, social workers, artists, entrepreneurs. Kamla listened to their stories with deep respect. These were remarkable women who had achieved extraordinary things. When her name was called, Kamla walked to the stage on shaky legs. The President of India, the President, smiled warmly and placed the medal around her neck. Cameras flashed. The audience applauded. And in that moment, standing on a stage she could never have imagined accessing, Kamla thought of her son Prakash. She wished he could see this, see what his mother had built from the ruins of grief. The citation read aloud highlighted her business success, her community service, her role in inspiring others. But what it didn't mention, couldn't mention, was the internal journey, the evolution from despair to determination, the daily choice to maintain dignity in the face of indignity, the courage required to accept help without shame and give help without expectation, the strength needed to stay kind in an unkind world. After the ceremony, Kamla was surrounded by media wanting sound bites. She spoke simply, as always. This award isn't just for me, it's for every woman who wakes up and faces another hard day with courage. It's for every grandmother raising children alone. It's for every person working in the informal sector without recognition or security. I'm just one story. There are millions more. That evening, at a celebratory dinner organized by Samarpan NGO, Kamla found herself seated next to another award recipient, Dr. Anjana Reddy, a scientist who had developed affordable medical technology for rural health centers. "Your story moved me deeply," Dr. Reddy said. "I came from privilege, educated parents, good schools. I had opportunities. But you created opportunities from nothing." "Everyone's journey is different," Kamla replied. "You used your advantages to help others. That matters just as much." They talked for over an hour, finding common ground despite their vastly different backgrounds. Both were women navigating male-dominated spaces. Both had faced skepticism and obstacles. Both were motivated by service rather than just personal achievement. "You know what I think?" Dr. Reddy said thoughtfully. "I think our country needs more stories like yours in our textbooks. Children learn about kings and wars and dates, but they should also learn about ordinary people doing extraordinary things through simple persistence and integrity." The idea stayed with Kamla. She mentioned it to Priya Singh, the journalist who was at the dinner. "What if we collected such stories? A book, maybe, or a series of articles. Stories of everyday Indians whose struggles and triumphs teach us something important about who we are as a nation." Priya's eyes lit up. "I love that idea, and you could be involved, choosing which stories to feature, what questions to ask, how to frame them with dignity." Thus was born another project, one that would unfold over the next year. But that night, as Kamla lay in bed with Priya curled against her side and Aditya asleep on the adjacent bed, she allowed herself a moment of pure contentment. 2 years ago, she had been invisible, struggling, worried about every rupee. Now she had security, recognition, opportunities. But more than that, she had proof that goodness could prevail, that hard work combined with integrity could create change, that one small act of kindness could ripple out in ways impossible to predict. She thought about the young migrant boy she had helped, the one whose struggle she had witnessed and whose need she had met with tea and kachoris and respect. He had no idea that those few minutes would change her life completely. But that was the mystery and magic of compassion. You never knew which gesture would matter, which moment would resonate, which connection would prove transformative. The next morning, they visited India Gate and the National Museum before catching their train back to Varanasi. Aditya and Priya were thrilled by the sights, chattering excitedly about everything they had seen. On the train, as the capital's skyline faded into distance, Priya asked, "Dadi, are you happy now?" Kamla considered the question carefully. "I'm content, beta. Happiness comes and goes. It's like weather, always changing. But contentment is deeper. It's about being at peace with your life even when things are hard." "But things aren't hard anymore," Aditya pointed out. "You're successful now." "Yes, we're in a better position. But life is always hard in some way. Just different kinds of hard. When I was struggling to feed you, that was one kind of hard. Now I sometimes struggle with too much attention, too many decisions, too many opportunities. Different problems, but still problems." "So what makes you content then?" Priya persisted. Kamla pulled both children close. "You two. Knowing you're safe, educated, loved. Knowing I kept my promise to your father to take care of you. Knowing that when I close my eyes at night, I did my work honestly and treated people kindly. That's contentment." Back in Varanasi, life resumed its rhythm. The stall opened at 5:30 a.m. Customers came and went. Geeta and Meena arrived for their shifts. The Sunday Kindness Kitchen fed hungry people. The business continued to generate modest but steady income. The television series filming resumed. Mentoring sessions with other women entrepreneurs happened weekly, but Kamla never forgot the core of who she was. One morning, about 3 months after receiving the award, a young woman came to the stall. She looked exhausted, her cheap sari dusty from travel, a small child on her hip. "Could I have some water?" she asked hesitantly. "We've been walking for hours." Kamla gave her water, then tea, then food, asking no questions. The woman's relief and gratitude were palpable. After she left, Mina said, "Didi, you're still doing it, even though you don't have to anymore." "I'll always have to," Kamla replied, "not because of obligation, but because of understanding. I remember being her. I might be her again someday. Life is uncertain. Kindness is certain. That's the only thing I truly control." Epilogue. Legacy in progress. 5 years after the viral video, Kamla Devi's life had transformed in ways both dramatic and subtle. The tea stall had expanded into a small cafe with indoor seating, proper kitchen facilities, and 5 employees. The Kindness Kitchen had become an established institution, feeding an average of 75 people every Sunday, funded by a mix of donations and profits from the cafe. Aditya, now 16, was excelling in his studies with dreams of becoming an engineer. Priya, 14, had developed a passion for social work, inspired by her grandmother's example and Simran's mentorship. Both children volunteered at the Kindness Kitchen, serving food with the same dignity their grandmother had taught them. The documentary series Invisible India had completed 3 seasons, with Kamla as host, featuring stories of auto rickshaw drivers, domestic workers, street vendors, construction laborers, and dozens of others whose labor built the nation while they remained unseen. The series had won awards and, more importantly, changed perceptions, making viewers see and appreciate the people they usually looked through. Kamla had become a sought-after speaker, invited to colleges, corporate events, and policy conferences. She had learned to navigate these spaces without losing herself, always speaking in simple language about complex realities, always bringing the conversation back to human dignity and basic decency. But perhaps her most significant achievement was the network she had helped create. Through Samarpan NGO and Mrs. Sharma's expanded federation of self-help groups, Kamla had connected with hundreds of women entrepreneurs across the region. They shared resources, knowledge, and moral support. When one struggled, others helped. When one succeeded, others celebrated. Simran, who remained Kamla's closest advisor and had become like a daughter to her, often reflected on the journey. "You know what's remarkable, Auntie G? You didn't just change your own life. You changed the ecosystem around you. You created employment, inspired others, built community institutions, influenced policy discussions. That's systems-level change." "I just make good tea," Kamla would reply with a smile, though she understood what Simran meant. On the 5th anniversary of the viral video, Priya Singh wrote a follow-up article titled, "5 Years Later, The Tea Stall Lady Who Changed Everything by Changing Nothing." The article traced Kamla's journey, but emphasized that her core character had remained unchanged. Success hadn't made her arrogant, recognition hadn't made her less compassionate, security hadn't made her forget struggle. The article quoted one of Kamla's regular customers from the early days. "She treats me exactly the same now as she did 5 years ago." That's how you know the success is real. It changed her circumstances, but not her character. That assessment was accurate. Kamla still woke at 4 a.m., though she no longer had to. She still kept meticulous accounts in a worn notebook, though she now also had computer software. She still treated every customer with respect, whether they bought tea worth 10 rupees or a full breakfast worth 100. She still remembered every kindness shown to her during hard times and tried to pay it forward. The only thing that had truly changed was her capacity to help others. Where once she could barely help herself, now she could create opportunities for dozens. Where once she felt powerless against circumstance, now she had agency and voice. Where once she was invisible, now she was seen. But more importantly, she had learned to see others who remained invisible. One Sunday morning at the Kindness Kitchen, now a bustling operation with multiple volunteers, Kamla noticed a woman sitting alone, eating slowly, tears silently streaming down her face. Kamla sat beside her. "What's wrong, Betty?" she asked gently. The woman looked at her, recognition dawning. "You're Kamla G. Everyone knows your story. How you helped people even when you had nothing. How you built all this." "That's past," Kamla said. "What's present? Why are you crying?" The woman's story tumbled out. Husband's recent death, 3 young children, no savings, no family support, overwhelming fear about the future. The exact story Kamla herself had lived a decade ago. Kamla listened without interrupting, holding the woman's hand. When she finished, Kamla said, "I understand. I've been exactly where you are, and I'm going to tell you what someone once told me. This is not the end of your story. This is just a difficult chapter. You're going to survive this. You're going to be stronger than you imagine." "How? How will I survive?" the woman asked desperately. "One day at a time, one meal at a time, one small decision at a time, and with help from people who understand." Kamla pulled out her phone. She had finally learned to use one and called Simran. Within an hour, they had connected the woman with resources: temporary accommodation through Samarpan's network, enrollment in a skills training program, assistance with accessing widow's pension, connection with the self-help group for microcredit. "You helped me," the woman said, clinging to Kamla's hands. "Why?" "You don't even know me." "Because someone helped me when I needed it. Because we're all connected, whether we realize it or not. Because your children deserve a fighting chance, just like mine did." That interaction, repeated countless times in various forms over the years, was Kamla's real legacy. Not the awards or recognition or even the business success. It was the web of support and kindness she had helped weave, connecting struggling people with resources and hope. That evening, as she closed up the cafe, she still insisted on being present for closing time. Kamla reflected on the 5 years since that October afternoon when she had given tea to a hungry young man. She hadn't known she was being filmed. She hadn't known it would go viral. She hadn't known her life would transform so dramatically. But she had known in that moment what the right thing to do was. And that knowledge, that moral clarity born from empathy and experience, had been her true guiding light. Aditya came to walk her home, as he did every evening now. Tall and protective, he offered her his arm like a gentleman. As they walked through the familiar lanes, now better lit and cleaner thanks to community efforts Kamla had helped organize, people greeted her warmly. Not with the fawning deference she disliked, but with genuine affection and respect. "Dadi," Aditya said as they walked, "my teacher asked me to write about someone I admire for an essay competition. I'm writing about you. Beta, write about your father. He was the remarkable one." "Papa was remarkable," Aditya agreed. "But you're remarkable too. You took his death, which could have destroyed us, and turned it into something meaningful. You gave us not just survival, but a good life. You taught us values that matter. You showed us that success isn't about money or fame, but about who you are when no one's watching." Kamla's eyes misted. "When no one's watching except your grandchildren," she corrected with a smile. "Yes," Aditya laughed. "We're always watching, learning, trying to be like you." At home, Priya had dinner ready. She had become an excellent cook. As they sat together, eating simple dal and sabzi, Kamla felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not for the material improvements, though those certainly made life easier, but for the fullness of this moment, her grandchildren healthy and happy, a day of honest work completed, enough food on the table, and the knowledge that tomorrow she would wake and do it all again. This was the real miracle. Not the viral fame or the awards or even the business success. The miracle was resilience. It was the human capacity to endure hardship and emerge with integrity intact. It was the possibility of building meaning from suffering, connection from struggle, purpose from pain. Kamla Devi had been invisible to the world for most of her life. That one viral video had made her visible. But the deeper truth was that she had never been invisible to the people who mattered: her grandchildren, her genuine friends, the customers she served with care, the struggling people she helped with dignity. And ultimately, that was enough. That had always been enough. As she lay down to sleep that night, Kamla whispered her usual prayer. Thank you for this day. Help me tomorrow to be kind, honest, and useful. Protect my children, and help me never forget where I came from. Outside her window, Varanasi hummed with its eternal energy. Temple bells, late-night traffic, the distant sound of the Ganga's waters. The ancient city that had witnessed countless lives, countless stories, countless struggles. One more story of survival and grace added to its infinite collection. And somewhere in that vast city, perhaps there was another struggling woman, another tea stall owner, another grandmother raising children against impossible odds. Someone whose act of simple kindness might one day ripple out in ways she could never imagine. Someone whose dignity in the face of hardship might inspire others to be better, kinder, more human. Because that was the ultimate lesson of Kamla Devi's story. We are all invisible until we're not. We are all ordinary until we're extraordinary. We are all struggling until we're thriving. And the difference between these states is often just a moment of kindness received or given, a moment of recognition, a moment of human connection that reminds us we're not alone in our struggles. The tea stall lady everyone ignored had become someone impossible to ignore, but she had done it by remaining exactly who she always was, a woman of dignity, compassion, and quiet strength. A woman who proved that heroism doesn't require grand gestures or exceptional talent. Sometimes it just requires showing up every day and treating people with basic human decency. And that, perhaps, was the most inspiring story of all. The end. Author's note. This story is fictional, but inspired by countless real stories of ordinary people, especially women, who demonstrate extraordinary resilience in the face of hardship. Every day, millions of informal sector workers, street vendors, domestic helpers, and small business owners build our cities and economies while remaining largely invisible to those they serve. This story is a tribute to their dignity, strength, and humanity,